This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices fell $2 in volatile trading on Monday as the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank hit equities markets and raised fears of a fresh financial crisis, but a recovery in Chinese demand provided support. Brent crude futures were down $2.03, or 2.5%, to $80.75 per barrel by 14:01 GMT. West Texas Intermediate U.S. crude futures, WTI, fell $2.11, or 2.8%, to $74.57 a barrel. Brent earlier in the session hit lows last seen in early January while WTI touched prices last reached in early December. Fears of contagion from the failure of Silicon Valley Bank led to a sell-off in U.S. assets at the end of last week, while state regulators closed New York-based Signature Bank on Sunday.
The share of African crude oil in India's total crude imports in February dropped to its lowest level in at least 22 years as refiners took record volume of discounted Russian oil and raised purchases from Middle Eastern producers under annual deals, shipping data obtained from sources show. Refiners in India, which in the past rarely bought Russian oil, because of high transport costs, have emerged as key oil clients for Russia, snapping up crude rejected by Western nations since the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Indian refiners mostly buy African oil through spot tenders. However, the nation's thirst for African oil has been dampened by easier availability of Russian oil sold at deep discounts.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Indian state-run refiners are setting up projects to produce 30.8 kilotons a year of green hydrogen by 2030, Junior Oil Minister Rameswar Telly told lawmakers on Monday. India, one of the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters, recently announced a 197 billion rupee ($2.4 billion) green hydrogen program to cut the country's carbon intensity and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Companies such as Reliance Industries, NTPC, Adani Group, JSW Energy, Renew Power and Acme Solar have announced plans to help India meet its goal to produce at least 5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030.
One of President Vladimir Putin's top allies said on Monday that the United States and Britain were sowing deceptions that a pro-Ukrainian group blew up the Nord Stream gas pipelines on the bed of the Baltic Sea last year. Last week, the New York Times reported that intelligence reviewed by U.S. officials suggested that a pro-Ukraine group, likely comprised of Ukrainians or Russians, attacked the pipelines in September. Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev cast doubt on that report, questioning if such a group would have the capability to carry out such a daring act of sabotage on Russia's most important energy corridors to Europe. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. India's Northern Federal Territory of Jammu and Kashmir will auction a lithium block discovered last month, the country's mines minister said in Parliament on Monday. The exploitation of lithium will depend upon successful auction of the mineral block, Minister Prahlad Joshi said, adding the timeline for an auction would be decided by Jammu and Kashmir authorities. The block, with estimated reserves of 5.9 million tons, is the first known lithium reserve in the country.
Iron ore futures climbed on Monday, with the Singapore benchmark rising back above $130 a ton, as improving profitability of steel mills and demand outlook in top steel producer China lifted sentiment, although regulatory concerns capped gains. The most traded May iron ore on China's Dalian Commodity Exchange ended daytime trade 0.5% higher at 929 yuan, $134.63 a ton, after posting its fifth consecutive weekly gain on Friday. On the Singapore Exchange, iron ore's benchmark April contract was up 2.5% at $132 a ton, as of 0730 GMT, hitting its highest since February 21st.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Russian wheat prices continued to fall last week on the back of large supply volumes, analysts said, as talks on extending a landmark deal allowing the safe export of grain from Ukraine's Black Sea ports began in Geneva. The United Nations brokered Black Sea Grain Initiative is up for renewal on March 18, but Moscow has signaled it will only agree to an extension if restrictions affecting its own exports are lifted. Prices for Russian wheat with 12.5% protein content, delivered free on board, FOB, from Black Sea ports, fell $2 to $290 a tonne last week, the IKAR agriculture consultancy said. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.